Zora Neale Hurston was somebody who revolutionized this for a lot of black women, and there were plenty of literary giants who followed right after her. We have an understanding of how aesthetics and imagery plays a role in how people consume us. If you are new here, hello, welcome, how you living? My name is Marquisedavon. Keith, but never call me Mark. Please do not do that, okay? If you are not new here and you are returning as a gracious listener that you are, welcome back. Nice to see you. I hope all is well with you. And so, today we're gonna get into a little bit of, it's not so rap beef, but lit beef, literature beef with literary giants, whatever, okay? If you want to support me monetarily, you can do so by heading to patreon.com/marquisedavon. That's MarquiseDavon. You can support me for as little as $2 a month, which is $24 a year. And that is just a good way to keep this podcast going, keep this podcast alive, because I really want to build out a team to help me edit and make more content at a faster pace, but still maintain quality content while also having opportunities to get better mics, invest in a camera, invest in space, invest in a team to be able to put this show together. So that is a big hope. So if you support me monetarily, you'll be helping this black boy achieve some of his dreams even more. But if you cannot afford to donate to me monetarily, then you can also do so non-monetarily. And so that is by supporting this podcast. When you see clips on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, you're sharing them, you're engaging in the conversation, and you are also engaging with me, right? But also utilize hashtag Podin, so PODIN. Also, if you want to hire me for some workshops, I do a backwards design workshop for creatives and small businesses and entrepreneurs. Some of us are terrible with goal setting. Sometimes I'll be bad with it, but like I can tell everybody else what to do. I just got to follow my own advice and get another person to tell me. But I have found success in my own space of doing backwards design as a ways to achieve different goals for different quarters, whatever the case may be. If you're also interested in discussing anything social emotional learning related or with black masculinity, I can do that as well. And so I'm super appreciative of this space, and I cannot wait to get fully into this episode because I get to geek out about some writers that I respect, but also we can get into a larger conversation around what does it mean when we put ourselves on the public display. So the big question that I'm asking is, when did literature begin to address Black American sexuality? And so I'm going to go through this story time that I'm just super fascinated by, and then we'll go here. But the literary beef I'm talking about is Zora Neale Hurston and Richard Wright, because they was definitely beefing, and she ruffled some feathers because of her character Janie from Their Eyes Were Watching God. And if y'all know me, and if you've been following my content for the last 6 years, you know that this is my book. I will reference it anytime that I get to reference it. But we're going to be talking around Janie's character, and not only just Janie's character, but also why Janie's character and Zora creating this character ruffled so many feathers, specifically around other Black men. And so W.E.B. Du Bois and Baldwin had always contemplated, what did it look like to put sexual acts within Black literature, right? And so you're thinking around the Harlem Renaissance, you're thinking around the Black arts movement going on. When was this first time that Black sexuality was put on display, but it was put on display that didn't necessarily require violence, right? And so when you think around past characters that were created, if you even think around Richard Wright himself, creating Native Son, Bigger was committing sexual assault, right? He was doing deviant things within the space of sexuality, and so it was much more done in secret or done in associating to violence and ownership of another person. Whereas you get somebody like a Zora Neale Hurston now asking this question around, what are healthy relationships around sex? What are healthy relationships around sensuality? All of this is going on right now within the world of literature, Black literature, but also having to combat the realities of blackface. So you're thinking around the Jezebel, you're thinking around the Mandingo, you're thinking around the Mammy, you're thinking around this hypersexualization of Black people. And so when you see white people do it on such a display, like everybody's imagination is that this is who Black people are, and they're trying to dictate our stuff for us. What does it also mean to reclaim that? because popular media, popular culture, popular depictions and entertainment can inform how people react to anybody. So we're thinking around like, oh no, every time we see a big black man and he's dark skinned, he's going to ravage these white women, he's going to do this. Like, this is a story that people have concocted. So we have to understand that aesthetics and imagery have been utilized to perpetuate a narrative that even black people fall prey to, right? We also will say, well, no, that must be true because this is how they are acting. But no, we need to be in genuine community with each other. And so I lay that out because Du Bois and Baldwin had talked around like, what does it mean to put this into the display, allow this world to exist within our literature, and know that sexuality shouldn't be taboo? What do we do to push this? And somebody who took their call was Zora Neale Hurston. And she created Janie. When they're looking for like this longing, this depiction, this healthy relationship to sex, this healthy relationship to sensuality, the reality is we had to have a black woman experience this and depict it. She was the first to really like name this and revolutionize it. And so Janie's character, Janie Starks, is a female protagonist in Their Eyes Were Watching God. This is like huge at this time because this is a character who didn't only just submit herself to one man. She had multiple lovers, different lovers at different iterations of her life. And it was all meant to be in a space of healthy sexual attachment and knowing that this thing doesn't have to be in a space of violence. It doesn't have to be in a space of a woman being owned in order for this to happen. And so to have a character like Janie meant that she was taking her stuff into her own hands, her life into her own hands, her sexual freedom and agency into her own hands. When they look at this, oftentimes when black women tend to do this, we tend to see what starts to happen. They get demonized very quickly. Lizzo owns her sexuality. She's demonized. Beyonce started owning her sexuality. She's demonized. Meg, other female rappers own their sexuality and they become demonized. We still have this today going on. The more recent example would be someone like a Chloe Bailey. It's okay for us to be able to look at a Chloe Bailey and be like, wow, she is so desirable. We really love her, X, Y, and Z. She's amazing. Like, we know Chloe just wants to let loose. She's developing her body. We're talking about her sexuality. But when she's able to finally start addressing it and trying to own it in a way that makes sense to her, everybody's like, nah, but not like that. Nah, now it's annoying because why are you trying to own your sexuality? Nah, this can't work like that. Like, and yo, when I tell you just watching the flip-flop was wild, right? Because it's okay to talk about a black woman's sexuality, but when you see it and they're like, nah, I'm owning this, there becomes an aversion to it now. Because there's a space where like you can no longer own that fantasy. They will dictate how you will experience them. This is a pushback to female rappers. This was a pushback to Chloe. This was a pushback to Janet Jackson. This is an age-old time. One of the first ones in popular culture to really deal with this was Zora Neale Hurston. It's super interesting because as she developed Janie Starks in Their Eyes Were Watching God, there was a 1975 essay titled "In the Space Where Sex Should Be," which echoed a phrase that James Baldwin had used about the same subject. Marilyn Nelson Wynick observed that far too many black writers, especially male writers, including Richard Wright, traditionally substituted the figure of white men as the embodiment of an all-encompassing and all-determining anti-black racism, precisely in the space in their text where the reader might expect to find a development of healthy sexual relations between black characters. Many critics have complain around the scarcity of fulfilling heterosexual relationships in novels by black American authors. This would also include most of the novels written by black men in this country, and they all lack a lasting sexual relationship between the black protagonist and a woman. Writers such as Toni Morrison, Alice Walker, Terry McMillan, and a host of others drawing upon the precedent set by Hurston's bold representation of Janie and James Baldwin's controversial depictions of both homo and hetero eroticism in his 50s and 60s novels. This is where we get into the drama because they were some messy people. I don't care. Niggas still messy to today, no matter what class you're in. No matter the profession, y'all niggas still messy. The politics of sexuality remain deeply problematic with black literary circles, reaching a boiling point in the heated vitriolic exchange between Richard Wright and Zora Neale Hurston in the late 30s, whose root cause, I believe, was Hurston's creation of a black female protagonist who was comfortable with and celebrated her own sensuality and who insisted on her right to choose her own lovers in spite of the strictures of the black community. In an angry and suggestive essay on Hurston's masterpiece, Their Eyes Were Watching God, which reads like an example of a playing on the dozens than a book review, Wright charged Hurston with pandering to the lurid taste and fantasies of white males. Hurston's prose, he says, is cloaked in the sensuality that has dodged the Negro expression since the days of Phyllis Wheatley. Wright then accuses Hurston of voluntarily continuing in the novel and the tradition which was forced upon the Negro in the theater, that is the minstrel technique that makes the white folks laugh. Wright reveals that what most bothers him about Hurston's novel is the sensory sweep, which he continues carries no theme, no message, no thought. Why? Because her novel is not addressed to the Negro, but to a white audience whose chauvinistic taste she knows how to satisfy. And he emphasized satisfy. Doing double duty here is not to be so veiled reference to Hurston's principled offense, her celebration of Janie's enjoyment of her own sexuality, which, as we shall see, Wright specifically mentions and insults and mocks. But first, Hurston definitely said, I'm getting my lick back. In self-defense, she gave as good of a word as she got. A year later, in a review of Wright's 4 interrelated novellas, Uncle Tom's Children, Hurston charged that Wright's novels wasn't concerned with understanding and sympathy. Rather, it was a book about hatreds, composed of stories so grim that the dimsel swan of race hatred must be where they live. And the only role of sex in his book, she said, was a motivation for murder. The hero gets the white woman most Negro men rail against. The white man who possesses a Negro woman, he gets several of them while choosing to die in a hurricane of bullets and fire because his woman has had a white man. There's a lavish killing here, perhaps to satisfy all male black readers. For good measure, Hurston also added that Wright's use of black dialect in his book is a puzzling thing. One wonders how he arrived at it. Certainly he does not write by the ear unless he is tone deaf. Make no mistake, this was some high-class signifying and playing to the dozens. It cracks me up because it was really interesting because he utilizes language and he critiqued her before around her language of using AAVE within her own writing. And so even when you do this, it is this idea of like, wow, why are Southern black people talking like this? Why are you depicting these people as feeling uneducated? So Richard Wright also played into this idea like, yo, you cannot make black people seem ignorant because we're falling into stereotypes. And let me take this a step back. Because when I look at it, I'm just like, nah, this was the first time that I saw somebody like write in a dialect that made sense to black people, but also did not have to make it seem like we were speaking a language that was unfamiliar or too high class to remove the realities of our worlds either. And I think around this because even us growing up in the Northeast, we all engage in this piece that's like, yo, Southern black people are ignorant. They're dumb. Why do they talk like this? We've all done it, right? And so I'm just like, yo, there is a space of even class and display of class and a certain aesthetic that must be followed that he did not like Janie exposing. And I think this gets to a core issue in terms of like the differences on how he believed he can achieve power through his writing versus how she was able to achieve power and liberation through her writing. And I think both have valid arguments to an extent. Now, I definitely lean on Zora Neale Hurston, let's be clear, because I think she displayed an honest depiction that other black readers wanted to see. Remember, they're looking at the regular black reader. She does not want to appeal to middle class senses, whether they are black or white. She does not think that she needs to upkeep this level of respectability in order to maintain a humanity. She created a black woman who was definitely like well ahead of her time. But to see this on display is also triggering for a black community who's trying to move towards this progress of humanity, because they also believe that like if I fall into this idea that black people like to have sex, we're reinforcing minstrelsy. If we're also speaking in a dialect that is not the most proper and prim, as people would say, we're now going back to minstrelsy. And so in this effort to have to combat the stereotypes, but also looking at a real life experience, but also just like what does upward mobility look like and why does it take conforming to do this? But also, is there some concessions that need to be made? All of this exists in this tension that's happening right now. And I do believe that this literary beef is still indignant of today. I am still seeing these exact battles and conversations be had. There is something to say around us not wanting to see public displays of ratchetness all the time. We'll take it as a form of entertainment because we're like, oh yeah, these black people are real ratchet and da 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 da. It's entertainment for people. That's reality TV. But even as we're looking at these characters that are coming about more, and as we're looking at this, we actually don't like seeing these characters in real life. We don't like seeing these people in real life. So we tend to hide them. We tend to hide our fat aunties. We tend to hide the fat black people in our family. We tend to hide the most ghetto of the people in our families, those people who do not know how to code switch, whether they had to do it or not in order to save their lives, right? Because we believe that these people are not going to give us progress. Because if they are put onto display, then they're going to assume that you're going to represent the rest of our community and you're doing a detriment. These are the realities of what people are thinking right now. And I think this is why we are also currently seeing this huge push against respectability, because I shouldn't have to sacrifice pieces of my humanity in order for you to deem me respectable, in order for you to think I'm worthy of your respect, right? And so we're seeing this generation start to push against what respectability traditionally were to look like. And it's also understanding like there is a time and a space for certain things. Like, I don't know if I'm going to go up cussing in a church. I still get awkward around cussing in a church, right? I still say my bad. I'm not even religious, but I understand the space and location that I'm in. However, there is something to say when you do have some of these black people who are just like, but why did you feel the need to put this on display? What was the point of doing this? Do you think this is advancing a cause? But as you are looking at this is now in a space where you have to toe this very fine line. Are you asking me this in order to appease white people? Are you asking me this because you genuinely care? Is there something that is actually causing a negative harm on me that's actually going to be something I care about? Because all of that plays a role. How we talk plays a role in how people choose to treat us. How we dress is a role in how people choose to treat us. How our education level, our job will indicate how people choose to treat us. And so Richard Wright wasn't the only person who was definitely trying to get at Zora Neale Hurston. Ralph Ellison, Alan Locke were both doing the same thing, because now you're trying to put this Southern woman's life, her love life, on display. And that's something that we're not comfortable with. Because once again, once a black woman decides to choose to own their sexuality, we have an aversion to this, because now we do it. We call them fast. Oh, you're easy. Oh, this can happen. Oh, well, you shouldn't do this because you were looking for this to happen, so you shouldn't address this way. All of this permeates. Zora Neale Hurston was somebody who revolutionized this for a lot of black women, and there were plenty of literary giants who followed right after her to also do this thing. Entertainers who followed after her to do this thing, because we have an understanding of how aesthetics and imagery plays a role in how people consume us. Right now, it's a sad reality that sadly, when a black person does something, do they still represent the entire community? Yeah, that's how the world is going to interpret them. Like, all black people do this. But there are so many different lived experiences and intersections and nuances to different black people in different regions and how we are able to exist in this world. The sad reality is, like, when you start to move up, your exceptionalism looks very different. Your class, your values, your morals look very different, because now you have something to lose. And so how do I protect this at all costs? I got to sacrifice parts of myself. I actually can't do this thing I used to do, because this can also push my money. This could take away opportunity. And so I can humanize and understand why people would get into it. But I can also understand that I can have a resentment for black people who tell other black people how they should live, because your singular experience is what got you your denotation of success, your idea of success. You don't get to do that. This is what's happening now. We need to ensure that so many more stories are being brought about, and so many different and various depictions of us are being brought about. So I spoke on it from a level of class, but now when we're looking at it from even working people's perspective, lower class people's perspective, it is this nuance of, one, yes, we are experiencing classism from black people. Yes, we're experiencing racism and classism from non-black people, white people, in these structures. We got to find that balance of, like, all right, this is your lived experience. And I had to figure that out when I got to college, because I'm saying, I'm just like, oh, no, you're rich from the suburbs. I do not understand why you're complaining about anything in life right now. And that strips somebody of their humanity and their lived experience. I may not readily understand or empathize, but it did teach me to listen to other people's experiences and their set of issues that they may go through. I was lucky enough to be in a space where, like, though I came from a low income background, I had a community that genuinely cared. I had a cohort of friends who gave a crap about me and my development and my growth. All of this stuff is significant to who I am as a person today. And so it is going to be an ongoing battle that we continue to have. And when you think about Richard Wright and you think about Zora Neale Hurston, Zora was absolutely correct in this, in my opinion. She was good to clap back. She was good to have to get in his ass real quick around how he displayed his ideas around sex, because it was still a respectable idea. It still wasn't truly honest. It dealt with power and violence, but it was not honest around like, what does healthy sexual dynamics look like? What does relationships look like? How are we also thinking around when we display the most intimate parts and personal parts of ourselves out for literature or media or anything like that? What are some of the reactions you're going to get? Some may be upset because why would you put that on display? Some people will be liberated because, like, yes, representation still matters for Black people, but this also normalizes the complexities of our humanity. Whether the content is made for us, whether the literature, the art is made for us, when other people are consuming it, there is an opportunity for learning to happen. There is an opportunity for empathy to be developed. There's an opportunity for people to engage in conversations that may not be directly towards each other, but it can at least serve as an opportunity to be like, hey, I'm really interested in this character. How do you feel about this character? You get to talk around class in a different way. You get to talk around ideas in a different way. You get to talk around concepts and arguments and debates and ethical and moral battles in different ways that feel healthy, but you're not attacking each other. You're doing it through this character. You're doing it through this book. You're doing it through this movie and film and TV. There are so many different avenues to it. I'm just fascinated by this conversation consistently because I am interested in knowing what does it mean for us to start embracing all facets of Blackness on here. What does it look like for us to start understanding these different lived experiences of Black people across class? What does it look like for upper and middle class Black people not to look down and be like, well, there's a few of us up here, so obviously y'all need to do something on your own to be able to get up here too, while also Black people who are in low income areas are also just like, well, there's a cultural component to like who we are, and there should be a normed experience on what this is too, because then that takes away from different displays of Blackness being able to be represented, because there's so many different facets. And I say this as somebody who really enjoys like television. I loved Queen Sugar because this taught me around a New Orleans Black farmers experience and the decisions that they make and the legacy that they have built and a specific culture down there. Visiting New Orleans, I was able to see that in its full form. Going to New York and seeing New York Blacks do their own thing. Philly being different. Going to Oakland and seeing how Black people operated there, that is different. And so all of these people have different lived experiences and different class structures and community structures and different motivations. A lot of us just want to simply live and exist, but it also taught me to be like, all right, let me actually be more curious around your lived experience. And they know, my listeners know, I still have a hard line. I'm still going to be like, all right, but you still upper class, so what we doing? You still have access to what we doing. But also I am thinking around embracing so many more lived experiences and allowing more people to have the representation that they want, because it can be liberating and can push humanity to be better. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think that Zora was right in her argument with not Du Bois, that's crazy. Richard Wright? Was Richard right? Did he have some facts that were stated on his end? How do you feel about when Black people are put on display in a way that's not deemed as what we call respectable or successful or what we want to see? Television characters that resonate with you, all of that plays a role. I'm super interested to see how this debate goes. Other than that, thank you for listening to another episode of This American Negro. I so look forward to the following episode. Alrighty, y'all. Peace.